Welcome back everyone to the video, and today we are talking about 5 players that I think could have a huge year in 2024, and for a lot of these guys it would be a breakout year. So that's kind of the focus of this video. We got some year 2 guys, we have some year I think 3 guys, maybe even a year 4 guy actually at some point in this video, so just hear me out on some of those, even though they may be at some of the later years compared to some of the younger guys in this. But first off, jump right into it. Actually, before we do, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers and currently closing in on 700. So I would appreciate all the support there. I do plenty of NFL videos like this. We do ranking teams and players and draft content whenever that time of the season's around. Just storylines throughout the year, team news, trades, all that kind of stuff. But to jump into this video and starting with Jameson Williams, this is someone that's been projected to kind of have one of these big breakout years. Really since he came into the league, even though the first year he was recovering from that torn ACL, he comes in, gets that like 40-yard touchdown reception. And then, after that, he does have a pretty solid year last season with 354 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, personally, looking at his game log from last year, I would argue his best game was the playoff game against the 49ers because of the strength of the opponent and also how much he contributed with 1 touchdown receiving and 1 touchdown rushing, being that 42-yard run he had to actually put the Lions up in that game. He had other games where he had more receiving yards, but to me, because of how big that game was and the strength of the opponent, I would argue that that's probably his best game of the season. Williams did have his most receiving yards against the Cowboys. No touchdowns in that game. I would say another pretty good game he had was also against the Bears, where he had 3 receptions for 44 yards and a touchdown there as well. He also had another game where he had 1 receiving touchdown, 1 rushing touchdown against the Saints also, although that's only for 1 reception and 1 run there. But he scored on both touches, so I guess that's pretty cool for what it's worth. And so coming to the Lions depth chart, Jameson Williams, at least for me, is someone that I'm really keeping an eye on this year because the talent is there. I think it's pretty undeniable. It's been the first season, yeah, he was hurt. Last season, you could argue, is pretty much his rookie season with having a full offseason to prepare and then actually, getting in the game and playing and all. And now going into this year, I think he's in a great spot. You still have Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator, so he's going to have a ton of stuff designed for Williams as far as like the sweeps and the runs and also some of like the deep passes as well. He's going to be a focus on this offense. And, looking at this, you're in a great offense that's very, not afraid to pass the ball, obviously. I mean, Gibbs is like one of the better receiving backs with his respective age, I guess, across the league. Although as time goes on, he will probably end up developing into one of the better receiving backs in the NFL. And so, you have Jared Goff, you have a reliable quarterback that can get you the ball. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have Sam Laporta, Jameson Williams, of course, and Khalif Raymond. So you have a lot of guys all over the field to where Goff can really distribute the ball pretty much anywhere. But what I think makes Jameson Williams so unique on this team is I think he has the opportunity and the talent to really just take the top off the defense. This is a huge vertical threat. He can get behind the deep zones, deep coverages. I think it's just being able to offer that to your quarterback can really change a whole lot. And with someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown, not that he can't do that, but he's more of like a guy just really all over the field. He's on like 5 receptions and on 20 receptions on crossers, all this stuff. You don't see him super consistently take the top off the defense, get like a 60-yard reception. Williams has the speed for that. I wouldn't say he has like incredible hands, but when you're that fast, you're behind everybody, it's usually you're pretty open. So I think the talent is there. I think he's on a team to where, he's really the second guy on this team. You could probably argue Sam Laporta is going to command a lot of targets as well, so it's kind of like tied for second maybe, with Amon-Ra being first. But to me, the way he's developed, we've seen his growth. I think while last season it wasn't the most yards, he was statistically pretty consistent when it came to yards. I wouldn't say super consistent, but fairly consistent at least. So where I think now that he's had another full season to really just keep training and now that he's fully healthy, there's no coaching changes. And I think he's only getting better. I know Dan Campbell recently said that he is a guy to keep an eye on. That's who he's been looking at. So, and that stuff's always said in the offseason. I never try and read too much into it. But judging from what we've seen on the field and the talent that this guy has, this is someone that I'm definitely eyeing as being a huge candidate to have a massive breakout year. And then switching over to defense, player number 2, who you guys hopefully have not forgotten about, is Christian Gonzalez. Now, this is someone that last year honestly kind of fell in the draft. I think he was projected like top 10 at one point. I think the Patriots got him at like 17, it says. So this is a great pick at the time. I remember actually at the time I was surprised that the Commanders chose Emmanuel Forbes over Gonzalez. Nothing against Forbes, I just thought Gonzalez was the better player. And unfortunately, he does go down pretty early on last season. But when he played, he was honestly pretty good. He made some pretty good tackles for a cornerback. He defended 3 passes with 1 interception. And I think the biggest thing, too, is that looking at the games that he's played, statistically, he played pretty well. And I think watching the games, it was pretty evident that this guy was quite pro-ready. And the Patriots, needing a cornerback, I mean, look at the teams this guy played. You can go back and watch it. They had him lined up on the side of the field with guys like Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson. Like, they weren't shying away from putting this guy on the best players on the opposing line of scrimmage. And Christian Gonzalez, and again, like I said for Jameson Williams, there's a lot to kind of go off of. Christian Gonzalez, there's technically not a lot to go off of. But from the limited sample size we saw and the talent this guy has, another full offseason to get ready. The Patriots defense is really the strength of this team. The offense is probably going to struggle. It's a young head coach. It's his first year, a young quarterback, a lot of young guys. There's a lot of things to kind of piece together. The Patriots defense, however, is honestly pretty good. And this is something that can honestly be one of the best guys in that secondary in year 2. So while there isn't a ton to go off of, I think in the limited sample size, we saw just how talented this guy really is. And judging off just how pro-ready he was supposed to be anyway, I still think this guy's a great candidate to really be a breakout player in his second season. And going over to the depth chart, looking at this, Christian Gonzalez is in a secondary where he has Jabril Peppers and Kyle Duggar, and he has Jonathan Jones and Marcus Jones as well. Like, there's a lot of talent in that secondary, so it would be honestly saying a lot if Gonzalez is able to really not like put himself above all those guys, but for him to stand out in that secondary, it means you're a pretty good player, because the Patriots secondary is honestly pretty talented. And like I said, it's what usually, not just the secondary, the defense as a whole, is what usually keeps the Patriots in games that they probably shouldn't be in. This is a very talented defense. Christian Gonzalez is a very talented player. I wish we had to see a whole season of him. Obviously, we didn't. But I think what we saw, he was not shying away from facing the best players, the best receivers on the field. The Patriots were going to be utilizing him in ways to shadow those guys anyway. So I really think Christian Gonzalez, given a full season, hopefully, as long as he stays healthy, I think he's honestly a great candidate to be a breakout player. And then staying on the defensive side of the ball, we have Bryan Bresee, I think is how you say it. Bryan Bresee, I think it's something like that. I think I said it correctly, but he's someone that I was honestly kind of surprised maybe didn't kind of explode onto the scene when he first came into the league. Well, first half of the season last year, he's going into the second year. But I was kind of surprised he wasn't like an immediate impact. I guess I just, I saw the talent there. But regardless, as the season went on, it became quite evident that he was not only developing, but his presence was being felt a lot as well. Finished the season with 4.5 sacks. As a defensive tackle, that's not really his number one job. But Bryan Bresee is a strong defensive tackle. He can help stop the run. I think as the season went on, he really kind of found his role on that defense. And what's really interesting actually about this defense is, as of right now, he's listed as second string. But I would be very surprised if he is not starting by like mid-season at this point. But what is really interesting, though, is the Saints D-line. Looking at this, Carl Granderson had a career year last year for the Saints. Cameron Jordan is kind of starting to decline. Not a good season at all last year for the Saints. I would assume he bounces back to at least some degree. You have Nathan Shepard there and Colin Sanders, who Colin Sanders is honestly a solid defensive tackle in his own right. But then you also signed Chase Young, who, is young, has very high ceiling if he can actually bounce back from the injuries. So this is a D-line with a lot of potential. And at least in my opinion, I think there's a lot of talent here, but no one really has their spot like locked in per se. I think Cameron Jordan, being that proven veteran, I think does, at least for a lot of the time. But Bryan Bresee, as far as defensive tackle goes, this is someone that as the season went on, he was starting to disrupt the run a lot more. He was starting to pressure the quarterback a lot more as well. And I really think he's a great candidate for a breakout player in year 2. And what's funny is you could honestly probably say Kool-Aid McKinstry, who the Saints drafted this season, is kind of a possible breakout candidate as well in his first year. So if you kind of are looking at this and going, man, that's another good candidate, I actually agree with that too. I think I almost did that, but I did want to go Brian Bresee because I feel like people almost forgot about him last season. This one that was, immensely talented, and I think, as I've said 3 times now, like as the season went on, it became more and more evident as he got more comfortable just how good this guy can actually be. So I had to throw him in there as a possible breakout candidate as well. Then going back to offense, I had to include Will Levis. Will Levis is so interesting to me because, like, he comes in, he's like 4 touchdowns, absolutely lights it up. And then, he definitely comes back down to earth a little bit after that. Like, he gets the 4 touchdowns against the Falcons and doesn't even get any touchdowns again until against the Jaguars. And that's like 4 weeks later. So, it was definitely a bit of a decline after that. But the guy is a rookie. And it's not like the Titans offense, or really Titans in general, like this, powerhouse team or anything like that. I think Levis, what was really known about him as a prospect, that was like a, non-negotiable, regardless of anyone's opinion of him, was the arm strength was absolutely undeniable. This guy has an absolute cannon for an arm, and he was able to actually show that, I would say, a fair amount in his limited time playing. A lot of those did not amount to wins, but to be fair, it's like, if Tannehill's in there, a lot of those probably wouldn't have amounted to wins anyway. The Titans are just at a weird stage of their team development, honestly. Like, you let Henry go now this offseason, but you do bring in a lot of new faces. So going to the depth chart now, Will Levis, like I said, I think he showed a lot of flashes as a rookie in his limited time playing. The arm strength was definitely there. The ability to extend plays and also run for some tough carries was also there. He's a tough player. He's, I think, honestly got a fairly high ceiling in the NFL. I think it was really just about, what you actually gave him early on, because I wouldn't say the Titans had really the best weapons. However, they did prioritize that this offseason. You bring in Tony Pollard after letting go of Derrick Henry in free agency. I think it's a nice move. Pollard's a pretty dynamic running back. That's something that can help Will Levis, underneath in the receiving game. Then also just in the running game, taking pressure off Will Levis. Same with Tajay Spears, who, in my opinion, showed a lot of potential in his first year as well. And then obviously some of the bigger names. So you bring in Calvin Ridley in free agency. This is probably their best signing in free agency, in my opinion. Ridley had a bit of an up and down year for the Jaguars. Still a great season. Wasn't the most consistent, but it was still a pretty good season. You still have DeAndre Hopkins. You bring in Tyler Boyd, who again has been on the older end, but still a somewhat decent receiver, at least wide receiver 3 at this stage of his career. And you still have Okonkwo as well for tight ends. So to me, looking at this, it's like, one of the struggles was definitely O-line. You also address that. You get J.C. Latham. So in my opinion, whenever I look at this, I really think compared to last year, the Titans did a good job of actually prioritizing addressing their weaknesses, considering what they really had to work with. And I think one of the main concerns for me is that the guys they've brought in or still have in their team, I mean, like their entire receiving core really not very young. There's not a lot of youth there. I mean, you're going to have probably a few more seasons out of those guys, at least a few more decent seasons out of those guys. And after that, you have to look elsewhere. Hopefully, Treylon Burks can continue to kind of develop and bounce back, but it seems like his role has been greatly diminished, unfortunately. But still, for this season, that's what we're talking about. And regardless of age, a couple of years from now and how their play will be, for this season specifically, I think these guys like Calvin Ridley and Hopkins and Boyd are still good enough to give Levis some pretty competent weapons and actually see what he can really do. He's not throwing to Nick Westbrook at Kenny anymore, who, look, is a fine receiver, probably not starter material. Neither is Kyle Phillips, who, again, was starting for a bit last year, probably not starter material. But, Ridley and Hopkins and Boyd, they're proven veterans. They can help coach up and help just, mentor, I guess, some of the younger guys at the very least. So I'm not expecting Levis to go out there and throw for like 4,000 yards this year. I think it'd be pretty cool if he did. But I would assume it would be more around 3,000 or so, because I'm not going to project the Titans to have this awesome offense and like super dynamic and super, I think they have some dynamic players like Tony Pollard, like I said it before. So all in all, I think if Will Levis can really hit his potential and if he really does take a step this year, the talent is good enough around him to where, let's go see what Will Levis can really do. And he might put up some, pretty decent numbers in a very tough division. And this might be a bit of a weird one, but I actually have Jerry Jeudy here. And this is a very strange pick because this guy was drafted in 2020. So it's not like he's super young compared to the guys we've already talked about. But he's on a new team now, and I do just feel like he's worth highlighting for sure. What's interesting to me is looking at this, it greatly corresponds with his targets, which, again, goes for pretty much any receiver. Jerry Jeudy, though, especially, is when he was not targeted the ball, whenever he was hurt like he was in 2021, it obviously reflects in his stats. When he was healthy and when he was targeted consistently and could stay on the field, this was a nearly 1,000-yard receiver who was a great route runner, and honestly, he was putting up touchdowns, 6 touchdowns in 2022. So I am interested at least just because of where he's now found himself in Cleveland. Jerry Jeudy is currently the wide receiver number 2 in Cleveland. He's behind Amari Cooper. I would argue tied for second with David Njoku when it's going to come to targets. But again, Deshaun Watson, it hinges a lot on Deshaun Watson of what Jerry Jeudy can really do. And really, I mean, again, a lot of the receiving targets because he is the quarterback. But when it comes to supporting like multiple 1,000-yard receivers, that really hinges on the quarterback. And the Browns are definitely not afraid to run the ball, especially when Nick Chubb is healthy. They probably prefer to run the ball. But you gave Deshaun Watson a whole lot of money, and you definitely want to see if this guy can return to how he looked in Houston, because this guy was incredible when he was in Houston. And I think that Houston Deshaun Watson we saw is definitely capable of, actually supporting multiple 1,000-yard receivers. So we're with Jerry Jeudy now in Cleveland. He's with another really good route runner in Amari Cooper. I don't think a ton is going to be asked of him that he's not already able to do. I think if he's able to just stay on the field, this is something that really could hit 1,000 yards. And again, for that to happen, it would have to mean Deshaun Watson is very consistent all year and stays healthy. Jerry Jeudy is consistent all year and stays healthy. And then probably wins targets over David Njoku. So I'm not going to say it's the most likely, but I did say this guy, toward the end of the video here because I still think it's like not, the most popular name for a breakout candidate. Honestly, you're probably not going to see this on a whole lot of other breakout videos. But Jerry Jeudy is an excellent receiver. I think he's proven that. Fresh starts can really change a whole lot. And if Jerry Jeudy is healthy, I think the talent is there. I think it just relies on his targets, like we saw with the stats. When he's given, close to 100 targets or 100 targets, he's able to produce. And I'm not going to say that's not a lot of targets, but I don't think it's anything that Deshaun Watson can't do as long as he's, back and actually playing like himself again. I think a lot would have to happen for this to really come to fruition, but I wanted to throw it in here just because I think it's a very unique choice, and I think Jerry Jeudy has a pretty high ceiling. I think Deshaun Watson has a pretty high ceiling. It just requires a lot of things coming together perfectly for it to really happen, but in my opinion, I think we've seen crazier things happen in the NFL, and I do want to throw Jerry Jeudy out there as just like, just in case. Just watch this guy just in case if he gets near 1,000 yards. He could actually be a lot better than people are actually giving him credit for. But that is going to do for the video. Let me know down below any players that you guys, are surprised I didn't mention. Now, just to be clear, this isn't like my top 5 breakout players, just 5 players I wanted to talk about. There is plenty of other awesome options for breakout players for this season. So let me know down below who you guys think will break out or your thoughts on my breakout candidates as well. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel for more NFL content like this. Leave a like on the video. I would really appreciate that, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.